Good afternoon, Manatee Chamber members, and welcome to our first attempt at a webinar. So, knowing how gracious Manatee County and our businesses are, please bear with us as we attempt our first full webinar via Zoom with our chamber members and our very special guest today, Moore Hallmark. We will be recording today's webinar. That way we are able to share the content with a much broader audience after the fact. So please know that we are recording today. We do have our audience muted as well as video turned off. So no worries, we are not going to see you in your t-shirt and shorts sitting there as you are working, many of you from home. We know that information has been moving and changing at an extraordinary pace, and so certainly the information that we'll share and discuss today likely will have changes and amendments to it as we go forward. It really seems quite unbelievable that a $2 trillion package through the CARES Act was passed through our federal government with just a few weeks worth of work. And what a large amount of hard work so many put into ensuring that we are starting to move forward with assistance, particularly for our small business members. Many of you have heard that Phase 4 and possibly Phase 5 legislation work is already underway, because we know that the CARES Act, while extraordinarily important, likely had missed some opportunities to help small businesses and nonprofits as well. And we applaud our legislators for continuing to be so open to dialogue and information from their communities, their states, and from concerned citizens across the country. Several of you submitted questions ahead of time, and I have shared those with Moore. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but please know that it's likely we will not get to all questions today on this webinar. But your Manatee Chamber team is committed to tracking down as much information as possible to answer your questions that we don't get to, and to share those with you after the fact. So to introduce Moore Hallmark, Moore is a great friend of the Manatee Chamber. We have had the opportunity several times over many years to have Moore here in our community, working with our chamber and our community's leadership on a number of issues in which our local chamber finds extraordinary partnership with the U.S. Chamber. Moore is Executive Director, the Office of Congressional and Public Affairs for the U.S. Chamber, and oversees 8 states here in the southeastern United States, including Florida. He was a very special guest at our Manatee Chamber leadership retreat this past fall. And Moore, while I certainly wish it was under different circumstances that you are addressing the members and leadership of the Manatee Chamber than what we're experiencing today, we are so grateful for the expertise and the commitment and the compassion that you share with us, and hats off to you and the U.S. Chamber team. You've been an incredible source of information for our chamber and our membership over the past several weeks. So with that, Moore, we would love to turn it over to you.
Okay, Jackie, thank you so much. Thanks to you and Amy and the entire Manatee Chamber and community for the invitation and opportunity to join you today to talk about this legislation that passed last week, but really the overall efforts by Congress and administration in response to this crisis that continues to grow by the day. As you may recall, this bill last week was not the first, it was the third. The first one, as you may recall, was a simple fix initially, or not a fix, but an initial injection of money that went for research and healthcare needs to the CDC and others to help make sure hospitals had the care and supplies that they needed. That was an $8 billion bill at the time. Shortly after that, back on March 17th, there was a focus with the Phase 2 bill, the Family First bill. And that bill really kind of funded or mandated some states for unemployment insurance programs, employers with paid sick and family medical leave benefits, and so forth. And then last week, in a bipartisan manner, Congress and the administration worked feverishly to get something done. They did. There was a little bit of a wrinkle there at the end, but they did come together and quickly passed it, and then passed it by unanimous consent by the House a few days later, and then signed into law on March the 17th, or March the 27th, last Friday, which is an important date to keep in mind because of some of these loans and bringing back employees that may have already been furloughed being brought back on within 30 days. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But we do applaud Congress and administration for their efforts to work together and to pass these bills on a bipartisan basis as well. Our feeling is simply that no family and no business should go bankrupt because of the financial hardships caused by the COVID-19. And so we're trying to do everything that we can from the U.S. Chamber standpoint in partnership with, and by the way, the great partnership, Jackie, with you and your chamber. You guys are good friends, good partners, and I've had the pleasure of knowing you both for a number of years, Amy as well, for many more as well. And so we've always appreciated the opportunity to work together and again, for this opportunity as well. Jackie, it's like I was talking earlier before we actually began. These presentations, I have learned, have become very casual conversations about this, about what's going on. I'll kind of run through the key provisions that the bill provides that are more important, I think, to the business community. But there are a number of provisions in the bill. And then answer some questions. I know a few have been submitted already, and others may come in as we speak as well, but I'll do my best to answer those that I can, get back to those that I can't, but understand that there's still some regulations that are being drafted and more information coming out in the next few days. And as that information comes out, we'll be sharing that with you, Jackie, to share with your members as you see fit and what's most helpful to them. Now, Amy, I think you're going to operate the slide, so we'll go ahead and start with the first one real quick. Let me kind of make this larger. There we go. As I was saying, this is the third package. This was a $2.3 trillion Phase 3 CARES Act. A great deal of money, but there's the potential for more money, really kind of based upon recommendations by the Federal Reserve, so it could expend even as much as $4 trillion. There's the automatic payments for individual taxpayers that we should see in our mailboxes, or many of us, in the next few weeks. It's a $1,200 per individual for those who make $75,000 or less, and a $2,400 check to those who file jointly and make $150,000 or less, and an additional $500 per child payment as well. There are monies for beyond those amounts, but that's phased down proportionally as well. And then there's unemployment benefits as well. This bill modified some that were already in the Families First Act, the Phase 2 bill. Most restrictions on eligibility are suspended if related specifically to COVID-19. And individuals must provide certification that he or she is able and available to work, but is underemployed and unemployed due to the virus. And there are a few different reasons there. One, obviously, if they have the virus themselves or show symptoms or have sought medical attention or are told by a health care provider to self-quarantine. If there's someone else in the household who has the virus and they're taking care of them, that's included. Obviously, schools and daycares are closed as a provision of this and is included. And then workplaces are being shut down as part of this as well. It does provide an additional $600 per week per employee upon agreement between the state and the federal government. And it also expands unemployment for 13 more weeks. And that runs really from January the 17th through December 31st of this year. However, the additional payments, though, the additional $600 and so forth, that does sunset July 31st. This compensation is 100% covered by the federal government. The eligibility does run out or ends when the individual does return to work. And the benefits are provided through the state's unemployment insurance offices. Now, this bill had a number of provisions. Again, I'm going to talk mostly with regards to the businesses, but there are provisions such as the tax changes for all employers. There are some business interest issues as far as the larger employers are concerned. And then more importantly for us, and what we're talking about largely, is how the small businesses, self-employed and others, will benefit from this program and from this bill itself. Next slide, Amy, thank you. As far as all employers, the payroll taxes, businesses and self-employed individuals can delay their payroll tax payments. Now, these payments, the employer's share of Social Security tax owed in 2020 can instead be deferred and paid over the next 2 years. Now, 50% of that is going to be due by December the 31st, 2001, and then the remaining 50% of that loan or taxes will have to be paid by December 31st, 2022. It's important to remember that this does not apply to any loans that have been taken out by the employers that have been forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program. And I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. As far as some of the tax changes, businesses that have a net operation loss in the tax years beginning either 2018, 2019, 2020, those can be carried back for 5 years, as well as suspend about 80% of limitations, suspends 80% of limitations, that is, and it also extends to pass-through businesses and sole proprietors. There's accelerants, recovery for alternative minimum tax credits, and it modifies or increases the limit on business interest to 50% from 30% for 2019 and 2020. And there are technical amendments regarding the qualified improvement property provision of the tax code. All employers also, if businesses are eligible for employment retention credit for your business operations, were fully or partially suspended due to the COVID-19 shutdown order, or gross receipts declined by more than 50% compared to the same quarter in the prior year. Eligible businesses can get a refund 50% tax credit, a refundable 50% tax credit on wages, including employer's health plan expenses paid by the employer up to $100,000 per employee. Now, employers with more than 100 employees, it applies to business employers. Sorry, guys. Employers with more than 100 employees applies to employees not providing services, and employees with less than 100 employees applies to all employees paid during the eligible period. Employers are not eligible if they receive the Paycheck Protection Program, and it allows for advanced payment of credit. Now, as far as the mid-sized and larger employers, we'll talk about the loans and loan guarantees and so forth. It authorizes the federal government, or the Federal Reserve, to create Main Street lending facilities for small to mid-sized businesses, projecting or providing $454 billion of liquidity for loans, loan guarantees, and investments in support of facilities established by the Federal Reserve under 13.3 authority to support lending to eligible businesses, states, and municipalities. Special programs for the airline industry have been established, and also for businesses that are critical to national security. There was $25 billion in loan and loan guarantees for the airline carriers, $4 billion for air cargo carriers, and then $17 billion for, like I said, businesses that are maintaining their national security. There are restrictions on stock buybacks and executive compensations. Borrowers are prevented from repurchasing stock and dividend payments while the loan is outstanding, plus an additional year after it has been closed. And then there are officers or employees whose total compensation exceeds $425,000 in 2019 cannot receive a pay increase from 2019 levels for 1 year after the date in which the loan guarantee is no longer outstanding. And we're likely to see new programs through the Federal Reserve that will support lending by financial institutions and businesses coming as we continue forward as well. Now, with regards to small businesses and the self-employed and independent contractors, nonprofits, and others, probably the biggest provision that this CARES Act created was the paycheck protection program. This program sets aside about $350 billion in government-backed loans for small businesses, self-employed, sole proprietors, freelancers, gig economy workers, and independent contractors. And is modeled after the existing SBA 7A loan program many businesses are already aware of. A business can get 2.5 times the amount of average monthly payroll, or up to $10 million is the maximum amount. Lenders may defer fees, principal, and interest for no less than 6 months and no more than for 1 year. Loans will be issued by local and national lenders. Currently, the SBA guarantees small business loans that are given out by a network of about 800 lenders across the country. This provision vastly expands that to virtually every bank and credit union out there. There are minimal requirements. In fact, there's no personal guarantee or collateral is required. Loans convert to grants equal to the amount spent on payroll, rent, interest on mortgage, and utilities for 8 weeks after origination. In essence, as long as employers continue paying employees at normal levels during the 8 weeks, then the amount they spend on payroll and the other items, then that portion of the loan will be forgiven. Now, loan forgiveness is reduced proportionally if the employer reduces the number of full-time employees or reduces wages by more than 25%. Employers can avoid reduction in avoid reduction in forgiveness if they bring back employees and restore them to their full wages within 30 days of the bill being enacted. And that was again enacted on March the 27th, last Friday. So you really have between now and April the 26th to bring those employees back on and begin paying them again at their full rate beforehand. This will continue and they will have that loan forgiven as long as they do so, and this is maintain those employees through June the 30th. If the full principal of the paycheck protection loan is forgiven, the borrower is not responsible for the interest secured in the 8-week covered period. However, the part of the loan that remains after the 8 weeks is not forgiven and is subject to loan terms agreed upon by you and your lender. This is a slide of something that we created. It's kind of a guide and checklist for small businesses on how to apply for these loans. Goes through kind of what's covered as your payroll cost, how much can you borrow. It covers, who's eligible and what lenders are looking for. So this is a great document. We've encouraged chambers and others to share this with their members to do it with their small businesses and others. And so we encourage you to get that out and share it with as many people as possible. It's a great way to kind of help show you what you need to be working on and how to apply for those loans. Amy, thank you very much. Now, going back or continuing on with the small business and self-employed portion, I talked a lot about the Paycheck Protection Program, and that is really kind of the biggest provision that was created in this legislation, and where the federal government really is encouraging businesses to maintain their employees. The whole idea is for businesses to continue keeping their employees, paying their employees, or bringing them back on and paying them, and at the very least provide some money for them to reopen their doors and have jobs for their employees to come back to once this crisis is over. It applies to all small businesses I mentioned a moment ago, self-employed, independent contractors, and others, including nonprofits that are 501c3s. Now, this provision, the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is open to all small businesses, again, that being numbers of 500 or fewer employees, full-time employees. And this also includes all nonprofits that are 501c6s, as well as the self-employed independent contractors. You can in working capital loan over a 30-year term at a rate of no more than 3.75 for businesses and 2.75 for nonprofits. Payments can be deferred for up to 1 year, and loans can be based solely on credit scores. Tax returns are not required. There's no personal guarantee on loans below $200,000, and there's no collateral required for loans under $25,000. Borrowers can receive a $10,000 emergency grant within the first 3 days of the application if the money is set to be spent on paid leave, maintaining payroll, increased cost due to supply chain disruptions, mortgage interest, lease payments, or other obligations that cannot be met due to revenue losses. This does not have to be repaid even if the application for the loan is turned down. And small businesses can get both the EIDL loan and a Paycheck Protection Program loan if they do not go towards paying the same expenses. They can also be rolled into one loan. However, I believe that the $10,000 grant will be subtracted from the combined loan. But be sure to talk to your financial advisor or lender before taking both types of loans, and if it's even necessary to do so. These loans, the Paycheck Protection Loan is done only and solely through your credit or your lender at the bank. But these economic injury disaster loans are through the SBA only. Now, the bill modified paid sick and family medical leave. This went into effect today. These provisions, all leave has to be specific to COVID-19. All provisions expire December the 31st, 2020. So none of these create a permanent paid sick or family medical leave program. They're 100% tax refundable, and self-employed folks are also eligible for both paid sick and family medical leave tax credits if the individual would have otherwise qualified for paid sick leave if they were employed by an employer. Now, employees with less than 500 employees are required to provide at least 10 days of paid sick leave if leave is related to the COVID-19. Sick leave can be taken when ill or quarantined due to exposure, or to take care of a sick person at home who's quarantined because of their sickness, as well as children who are out of school or out of daycare because of it. Leave is paid at a regular rate with a maximum, though, of $511 per day. If care is taken for themselves, it is paid at 2/3 rate with a maximum of $200 per day if you're at home taking care of somebody else. Payment is up to the maximum is reimbursed by the federal government, and leave is in addition to any other leave an employer already provides. Businesses with less than 50 employees may be exempted from providing leave related to care for children whose schools or daycare are closed if providing leave threatens the viability of the business. And then the paid sick leave is not available if employees can telework. With regards to the paid family medical leave, employers, again, with less than 500 employees are required to provide up to 10 weeks of paid family medical leave if an employee needs to take care of a child due to school or daycare closed because of the COVID-19. Leave is paid at 2/3 rate of pay at a maximum of $200 a day and $10,000 in aggregate. Paid leave or paid family medical leave is in addition to any leave an employer already provides. And then payments for family medical leave will be reimbursed by the federal government up to the maximum. Again, same as a moment ago, businesses with fewer than 50 employees may be exempt from providing this leave related to the that care, again, for children and so forth, if it threatens the viability of the business. And again, the leave is not available if an employee is able to work from home. There are several resources. I was commenting to colleagues and others earlier today that we are developing resources daily, providing as much information and resources to chambers so that they can provide it to their members every day. But a couple of really good sources are these two websites. If you go to the uschamber.com, you can there'll be a link to the coronavirus, and should be able to provide you a lot of the resources that Jackie and Amy might have sent to you already. And then there's also a good business resource, and I encourage any business to go to it and go there often for many other reasons, but in particular with the coronavirus right now and what businesses need to know, how they can react and what they can do. uschamber.com/co. And there's a special link to the coronavirus there. We have lots of resources and information for you there as well. Jackie, that's really kind of all I want to the prepared remarks I want to kind of go over. I'm happy now to kind of turn it over to you to facilitate a few questions, if that's okay.
Thank you, Moore, so much. And again, I just reiterate what an incredible partnership our local chamber feels with the U.S. Chamber, with you specifically, given your dedication to the Southeast United States. And again, the fact that this isn't the first time that we're speaking, or certainly we've had so many opportunities to be with you in person, which to me just shows the commitment that you have to our area. So thank you. We do have a number of questions that were submitted ahead of time. I believe some of them were answered, but we'll just go through them quickly in case anyone missed the answer or is unclear based on Moore's very, very thorough presentation. And then if any of you want to submit additional questions, and we'll see what time we have, please use the Q&A feature that I believe for those of you at least on a desktop or a laptop, we'll see at the bottom there's a Q&A feature if you'd like to type your questions in. We've already had 3 submitted that way as well. So I think you've mentioned that or answered this already, Moore, but if you can say definitively for businesses that have applied for the EIDL, the EIDL loan, they can also apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. And I understand you said there may be some subtraction of the value of the EIDL from the PPP, but they are businesses and 501c3s can apply for both. Is that correct?
501c6s can apply for the EIDL, but businesses can apply to both.
Okay.
And the loans can be merged together. What I was saying a little while ago, if I understand correctly, so you can, if you apply for an EIDL loan, you are eligible or able to apply for and receive potentially a $10,000 grant in the first 3 days of the application. And that's really, it doesn't have to be paid back, but it has to go towards, paying for utilities and payroll, and interest on mortgages and rent and leases and stuff like that. It can also go towards paying for any disruption in the supply chain of work, whatever is kind of maybe expenses that are being paid to suppliers for products or inventory and things like that. That can kind of go to be paid for some of those bills and things like that as well. The Paycheck Protection is a little bit more limited. It has to be for payroll, mortgages, rents, leases, and utilities. It doesn't go towards the other payment things of disruption in the business expenses and so forth like that. And so if you're a business, you can apply for both. If you're a 501c6, I think you're limited only to the SBA loan right now. And that is something that we are going to be working with congressional leaders on trying to include in the Phase 4 bill. Jackie, as you may recall, you and Amy both, but for those who are listening in, last week, this became a very big issue before they voted on it. And in a matter of less than about 3 hours, we were able to encourage chambers like yours and others around the country to sign on to a coalition letter of chambers and trade associations around the country. In less than 3 hours, we had over 1,400 sign on to that coalition letter. It was more than 30 pages long, and we sent that to every member of Congress. As our chief policy, our senior vice president of policy at the chamber, Neil Bradley, said, before we did that morning, this provision was dead in the water. And by the end of the day, after they'd received that letter, many members of Congress were trying to incorporate that in. And in the end, regrettably, we weren't able to make it in there. However, those same members and others understand the importance of it. And we're hopeful that maybe we can get 501c6s included in the phase 4 bill.
Thank you, Warren. And for those of you that don't know the distinction between the different types of nonprofits, chambers of commerce are 501c6s. So what he was just referring to as far as the concerted effort was to allow chambers of commerce to have access to the PPP. We currently cannot, but I have to tell you, we are thrilled that the majority of our members, both small businesses as well as our 501c3 nonprofits, are eligible for the PPP. We're just hoping that at some point in phase 4 or phase 5, chambers of commerce as employers ourselves are able to access those same resources. Just to follow up on that too, as far as the EIDL loans, we've had 2 questions come in. Are 501c3s able to use EIDL, or is it just C6s and for-profit businesses?
Jackie, I apologize. Please say it again.
That's okay. For the EIDL loans, does that
Yes.
include 501c3s? So can 501c3
Yes.
nonprofits access both?
They can.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a couple other questions that are coming in on chat since it's on this topic. Single member LLCs that do not have employees or payroll, what is available to them, if you know?
I would say the EIDL loan, because it does apply for, and actually the PPP as well. It's for self-employed, independent contractors, self-employed, independent contractors. So I would, freelancers, they're included as well. I think it may just be a question for your lender, but I would say you're available for both.
Thank you. A question also on calculating payroll or average payroll. How is the average determined, and is it per location or for the company as a whole? Because I know we have several chamber members who have more than one location.
There is, probably that resource I sent you, is that I referenced, the small business guide and checklist is probably the best answer, and I just pulled it out to take a look at it. But the payroll costs are calculated when you take the sum of the included payroll costs, which would be salary, wages, commission, cash for tips and equivalent, payment on vacation, parental, family, medical, and sick leave. These provisions then subtract the excluded payroll costs, which would be the compensation of individuals in excess of an annual salary of $100,000. That's where it's all capped. And then the payroll taxes, actually railroad retirement taxes and income taxes, you exclude those. And then that equals your payroll cost. Honestly, I'm probably not saying that very clearly because I haven't had to calculate that information myself. But again, the best resource is that document we sent around last Friday, I believe, Jackie, to maybe share that with your members that maybe would see that and read it instead of hearing it a little bit better.
Okay, and my guess is that lenders will be able to walk businesses through that as well.
They absolutely will, and they're the best. At the end of this day and everything else as well, as you start filling out your applications and talking to your lenders, keep in mind the lenders are still learning what they're eligible and able to do as well. I was talking to a chamber exec just this morning who had spoken to a lender yesterday morning about some of these provisions and expectations coming down from the Treasury and SBA. And then that lender called him back at the end of the day and said, everything I told you this morning, forget about it. It's all changed already. So a lot of this, my point is, be sure to talk to your lender. Again, there probably won't be many banks and credit unions out there that won't be able to provide these PPP loans. But talk to them about what best suits your business and how to best calculate that as well.
And maybe a follow-up question, although possibly a similar answer, in thinking about the types of businesses, restaurants and bars that were ordered to close, or at least limit themselves to only takeout, which made it untenable for a number of businesses that are restaurants to continue to do that. In thinking about the total employees, and if they've had to completely shut their doors, does this require that they still pay all employees their normal wage? Or I think the threshold was you couldn't reduce pay by more than 25%. And then also related to a business that has a more seasonal workforce, I think I heard you say and saw on the slides that if not all employees are kept, but a portion are, that the benefit of PPP could be proportional to what you're able to keep on, or the proportion that you're able to rehire. Is that correct?
That's correct. They have to, if you've already furloughed them, they need to be rehired within 30 days now, or since last Friday, so that's till April the 26th. They will need to be rehired and maintained at their regular rate to have their loan forgiven. If not, then they'll have part of it forgiven, but not the entire loan amount forgiven. And I was just looking up, Jackie, I apologize. There is a little bit more flexibility if it's a seasonal worker. And I'm trying to find that right now in my notes, but there is a little bit of difference there. Not much, but a little bit of a difference.
Okay, and again, my guess is that the lenders that are the 7A lenders will be well-versed in answering those types of questions as well. And so kind of, again, how we started the whole conversation about the PPP in particular, since you apply for those through a bank or a lender, is to start, the conversation should start with your local banker.
Correct.
A couple other questions, and this is one that applies really to the additional federal coverage for unemployment, and I'll just read it verbatim. With the maximum unemployment wage of $275 in Florida and the additional $600 for the federal government, there is an expectation that some employees will receive the full amount of, in this case in Florida, $875 per week. Yep. Assuming a 40-hour work week, it's equivalent to almost $22 an hour. The primary goal of the PPP is to bring employees off of the unemployment ranks. How is a small business supposed to accomplish this when it may be financially more attractive for an employee to draw unemployment than come back to work?
That's a great question. And if you recall last week when the Senate was trying to pass this, it got hung up. There were about 4 or 5 senators, including Lindsey Graham, I think Senator Tim Scott, both of South Carolina, and a few others, held up the vote because you're exactly right. It was the way the language was drafted at the time would have made it more attractive to people to stay off of or not go back to work and to stay on unemployment. The additional benefits, the additional $600 now, the additional benefits sunsets as of July the 31st, and that is to hopefully alleviate that problem from happening. That this doesn't become a long-term solution for those who just want to just stay at home and not go back to work because it pays more money to stay at home instead. They fixed that, and so now that language says July 31st is the cutoff for that. Gotcha. Those additional benefits, not the state benefits, but the additional $600.
Okay, great. Did we answer the S Corp question. I'm sorry, I've got a lot of papers in front of me, but if you're an owner and employee of an S Corp, can you access this program and pass through S Corp income? And would part-time employees count?
Part-time employees do count. You just have to kind of calculate on a 2-week basis what their average their average hours and pay is in the calculation. And some of the stuff is still be kind of worked out as far as the formulas on how to do that as well. S corps, talk to the lender again. I apologize, but I would, on the surface, I would say yes, there's eligibility, but again, talk with your lender. I'm sorry, I can't answer that one specifically.
That's all right. And maybe a very nuanced question, again, knowing lenders are going to be the best suited to answer this. We did get a question about replacing employees and the ability of it counting towards your PPP forgiveness. I'm reading into the question, so I apologize if to the member who submitted it if I'm misinterpreting. But can an employer replace an employee in a position that I'm assuming may be a position that has already been furloughed or laid off and still get that portion of the loan forgiven? My guess is, what if that individual is no longer available to be rehired back? Is it about the position or the employee or both? If you know.
It's a great question. My initial response to the first half, I guess, until you said they weren't available for the job anymore, would have been yes, they would. They just have to rehire them in the first 30 days. That's a great question because it differentiates between the employee and the position. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay. We appreciate it. As far as insurance, does it matter whether or not it's a group plan in thinking about expenses and reimbursements, or if your company is gives you a stipend, does that count in any way towards any of these programs?
Yes, in the sense that considering a stipend, I think you include that in your calculations along with, again, tips and commissions and other compensations as you're calculating the amount an employee makes, and for the amount that you would take out to cover those costs.
Okay. For anyone else that has a Q&A, if you can submit it via the Q&A button. Rob, I'm not sure if we've still answered your question. If you can type it from scratch and I can ask more a different way. It's my fault for not being able to correctly interpret the question, so I apologize. So if anyone else has a question, to type into the Q&A feature down at the bottom. Should be at the bottom of your screen if you're using a laptop or a desktop. Okay, under 50 employees is exempt from FMLA, correct? If we're exempt, can a 501c3 still access the benefits in the Family First Act?
But in the Family First Act, those employers with less than 50 employees, the exemption was the same.
Okay. Question about 1099 employees. Are they on their own? There might be a business in this case that has a bookkeeper that's a 1099, but is paid a certain amount per month for health insurance. Any idea what that employer might do in that situation?
You mean as far as filing unemployment or being calculated in the employer's employees and positions and stuff?
I'm going to guess, Rich, that you mean what do they do as far as the PPP program, and does that count towards the payroll if the $500 a month for health insurance is considered compensation?
Yeah, I would say that the insurance compensation is available to them and should be calculated in their numbers.
Okay.
I'm still not sure I'm answering that question, Jackie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So if I'm trying to understand it, so if an employer hires someone who works almost as a contractor, as a 1099 employee, I believe they would need to count that employee as part of their numbers, but that employee as a 1099 would be able to qualify as almost kind of an independent contractor.
Gotcha. Question on unemployment benefits and the impact on unemployment insurance. Does an employee filing for unemployment benefits as a result of the COVID affect the employer's unemployment insurance costs?
I have not seen anywhere in the legislation that it does. A lot of this stuff is being forgiven by the unemployment insurance at this point. As much like the loans, they're being, in fact, I want to say I have seen something written where that will not be held against them in this case. There's a lot of forgiveness and understanding from both the government, state, local, and level, state, federal, and local on the unemployment insurance stuff, as well as the obviously the loan forgiveness and so forth as well. So my short answer and belief is no, they would not be held against them.
I've heard similar more through some of the chamber groups across the country that are hearing the same types of questions. Again, we're not the experts, but I have heard that there also is going to be a tremendous amount of graciousness in not having unemployment impact negatively the business given the circumstances.
Right.
Are you hearing anything more about timing? We've got a member that said they applied for, the EIDL with the $10,000 grant this over the weekend. Should they expect something in the next day or two, or could it take, upwards of weeks to receive funds? Have you heard?
I've had others ask that, and from what I understand, in fact, I was on a call yesterday with a couple of chambers there in Florida, and one of your state representatives in the legislature was on, who's actually a chamber executive himself, was able to kind of suggest that the calls into the state for unemployment, they do have hours. I'll say like 8 to 5. I'm not sure what their hours are, but they're 7 days a week right now. And he said, while people are calling in for those type of benefits, they're having a hard time getting through, but suggested that they contact them over the weekend when volume is a little bit less. For one thing, as far as the loans themselves, it's my understanding the SBA is on that $10,000 grant right up front is a 3-day turnaround. At least that's what's kind of in the legislation for them to do. But banks, keeping in mind, they're learning this as well. And our advice and recommendation is to get in your loan as quickly as possible, but understand there will be a lag time. And these are available till June the 30th. So there's some time, but still, don't hesitate to get these things in. And one of the things that we sent last night, Jackie, to you and Amy and other chambers was some more resources, one being the application for these loans. And then a couple of others were some kind of, questions and answers for borrowers as well as lenders that we've kind of come up with or seen and try to provide you guys as well. So my answer is to do it as soon as you can. As I understand, starting Friday, small businesses and sole proprietorships can apply for the loans for PPP loans. And then starting April the 10th, independent contractors and self-employed individuals can apply. So there's a little bit of a kind of a week between who can and who can, and that information is on that email that we sent out last night.
Gotcha. I believe we've covered the questions that have come in via the Q&A. If anyone has one last one to ask, we will be happy to entertain that at this point. Again, any questions that come in after the fact, our staff here at the Manatee Chamber is committed to trying to track down as much information as possible for your questions, both related to today's webinar, but again, about anything that's going on here in our community, our state, or our country as far as resources for our members. So you guys have about 10 seconds if you use that Q&A feature down at the bottom there to ask any additional questions at this point. I'm not seeing any typing come in live. If I've missed any, I apologize. Blame me. Don't blame more. And then more, any closing thoughts before I say an official goodbye to you and our members on this webinar?
I don't think so, Jackie. I would just simply say thank you for, well, your friendship, but obviously your partnership between the Manatee Chamber and the U.S. Chamber. Um, I think I said this at the beginning. We really can't do and be as successful as an organization from a federal perspective without the partnership and relationships we have with you guys, and then and therefore the relationship you have with your members. We rely on that a great deal. Through this difficult time, we want to be as much as a resource to you as we can possibly be. So if there are things that you need from us, let us know. And if we don't have it, we will try to produce it. But I hope that we have that information now. And it's all with the purposes of helping you provide better resources to your members as well. This is a challenging time for everybody. Again, we don't have all the answers. We can just interpret the legislation as passed the best we can. We understand that there's still some regulations that are still being drafted by the federal, by SBA and the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department on how these loans and stuff will be implemented and how quickly and so forth. So we appreciate the understanding that while I might not be able to answer all these questions, some of them are things we haven't even heard asked yet. We'll continue to work on those, and we're trying to put together a good frequently, an FAQ, I guess. And we'll have that available at some point here very soon, I hope, as well. So there's a lot going out, a lot on our minds. We're working for you guys as best we can. And again, I just appreciate the opportunity and the partnership with you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, would you be willing for just a couple more minutes since we're still under the hour mark? Because a couple more came in as you and I were chatting this last minute.
I can do one more. I've got another
Okay.
call I've got to jump on in a second.
So this is given what was just declared here in the state of Florida. How is the program going to work when we're on a stay-at-home order? It seems like programs are somewhat contradicting what government is telling workers to do and businesses, which is to keep your people home. There are plenty of jobs that can't be done from home. Are we supposed to bring people into work when we're supposed to stay home, or how is that impacting PPP?
You know, Florida, you just came down with this. You know, the president issued a work from home kind of mandate for the federal government through the end of April. I think your lenders there will. I think this will help apply towards that from there. Now, not every state is in the same boat as far as a stay-at-home order, but since Florida's kind of going that direction, I think that will play into I think the lenders will accommodate that. Again, it's all under the provision that in the legislation that if you're required to stay at home, then this is all part of it. So I think it would apply.
Thank you. Maura, you've been so gracious with your time, chamber members. Thank you so much for jumping on. We will be sharing the link to the webinar once we are able to have it posted here. Maura, thank you so much to you and the U.S. Chamber team for being such an incredible resource to the chambers here that are seeking to serve our local communities. We are deeply appreciative. We look forward to the next time to talk with you, and we wish you good health. Stay well.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.